Life is good, but it can be better.
Thanks, Mando. Anyway, this is the Mk3. Let's crack it open and see what's inside. So first things first, we're gonna need to de-accessorize everything. That means removing this, setting it off to the side, removing this, setting it off to the side, and also this. One interesting part that people might not be thinking about taking off is gonna be this rubber grip. To get at the inside, you're gonna have to remove this. Now to remove it, but obviously you wanna keep it because it's a pretty great little feature, you're gonna want to press down on the rev trigger as you kind of peel it off of the blaster. Next, you're gonna wanna strip out all of the main body screws. You can actually skip these guys. Batteries first. So there's our female XT60 connector. That's gonna come in incredibly handy later. All right, so once you've removed all 22 of these tiny screws, set them somewhere that you cannot lose them, all kind of off by themselves, as all of the body screws are the same length, and then you're good to butterfly open the shell. There's actually conveniently a slot here that you can tuck your XT60 connector through. Now the only thing on this side of the blaster is of course your selector switch. That's going to go back and forth, and all that does is actuate this ramp on this side of the shell, which effectively just lets you either leave this straight up in semi-auto mode where you guys can clearly see it works just like a strife pusher thrower arm system to push the darts through here into the flywheel system, or if it's depressed like this, it actually engages a gear train with the Bart Simpson gear, and that's what, upon hitting the switch, is going to move the pusher, grabbing it up here and pulling it away. So you're really just disconnecting from this one linkage and connecting to this linkage up here electronically. So the trigger is really just kind of pulling double duty depending upon what it's doing. Now, your rev switch, no matter what, is going to both allow you to pull the trigger, so that's like a lock of sorts, and also it's going to push the lock up and into place. This would actually be a more complicated lock to remove, and while I don't think that it's necessary to do for this series of modifications, the one thing that I am pleased by is the overall quality of switches and wiring going throughout this blaster. I mean, you can see here, this is 16 gauge threaded silicone wire all the way through it, and it's just pretty awesome stuff. The only other thing worth mentioning at this point before we gut it is that the muzzle is entirely one piece using 4 more body screws, so if you lose one you can pull them from here, but for our purposes we're going to set this aside. I think that we could do a little bit better. The flywheel cage is something that we're going to talk about, but first we have to get the entire linkage out of the blaster. When you take this part of the cabling out, just keep in mind how these were wrapped both around the posts and then come up like this. It's part of what makes the XT60 connector so stable in here. Obviously, to do any sort of like aesthetic work, you're gonna have to take all the electronics out. I like to leave the screws that are body specific. Both of the switches come out very easily. Again, almost like this was designed to be pulled out this way. But now we can take a better look at some of the electronics as soon as I grab this last thing here. This is a good example of where like manufacturers like Hasbro would use a piece of glue to tack this in or something along that lines. It's actually really flattering, really nice. The Dart Zone kind of designing for performance, designing for modular internals of sorts, has gone ahead and used mechanical fastening to hold all of their wire channels in. It's just a nice little feature that makes our life that much easier. Now, you've got 4 flywheel screw ports here. They're unique screws, just make sure that you set those aside, and then all of your internal screws are silver, whereas your external screws are black. On the other side here, we can see that there is a pusher motor. Looks to be a standard 130 size can for the pusher motor, as well as an electronics board that we don't really have to fool with. You could rewire out this board, but I think that the board is fine. It might be a flyback diode. It's hard to say. It's not doing the full work of something like, say, a MOSFET, but it's pretty close in terms of its functional use case. Now, over here, We have 2 boards on the flywheel motors themselves. The flywheel motors themselves actually look to be quite robust. They've got active venting for cooling purposes. It looks like they might have carbon brushes. It's hard to say, but they're definitely delivering serious performance. Again, getting stock performance on a 3S LiPo of up to 180 FPS is no joke. The concavity on these flywheels is very, very cool. The flywheels themselves being clear is nice. A lot of these components would be useful. However, we're gonna be redoing some of them, not all of them. We're gonna maintain this entire pusher linkage system because I think that the pusher is quite good in how it's set up right now, and I don't wanna mess with it given how it's injection molded, and I don't have to re-switch the blaster, which makes that a lot easier as well. So the only thing that we're gonna be messing with here is the flywheel cage. There's just enough slop here where I feel like we'll be able to use their stock wiring looms on a new motor cage setup. But with that said, all we have left is the blaster shell itself, one additional screw that came off of this guy. And I've gone ahead and locked back in a lot of this. Interestingly enough, these tabs here, if I pop them out, will allow me to paint this an off color. That'll be really important for matching your battery door if you choose to go with an aftermarket one. But even cooler than that is we have 3 screws here that are gonna allow us to install pick rail on the sides, as well as debadge the blaster just a little bit. Now this is, you know, the same on both sides, although it's mirrored, but this is where the Mk3 logo is. We're going to use this to install, pick rail by taking this panel out. Of note, you can see, looking closer at it, that the shell itself has active cooling for the motors. In addition to the vents, there's holes in the shell here that let air move through and keep everything, you know, nice and well regulated. So other than that, we've got this hole off here. We've got some text here. We're gonna pull this panel off. It's time to take this over and start sanding and painting now that we've gutted out all of this stuff. Let's go. So while there can be no doubt that the original motor cage and wheel and motor assembly is all quite robust, getting, you know, performance up to 180. We smooched that with a couple of shots. The motors remind me of earlier Foam Blast Edition motors, and then the wheels, of course, remind me of worker wheels with their concavity and their knurling. We know that there is a better option, and the way that this has been soldered is almost easy to drop in a new cage. So we went ahead and we revised our incredibly robust Magilla cage crush system for the hole spacing of the Mk3. We're gonna mate that with our Twilight wheels. We're gonna make something really special. But I thought about how large the shell is, how much space there is inside, and how the cage was designed originally, and I busted something special out of the archives. These are original Fang motors, not Fang revamps. These are that old school cool, those 132s, those torquey boys. Let's go ahead and throw them in. If you've never seen soldering before, we're gonna jump through it pretty fast. right guys, so off camera I decided that I was going to do a little bit of Nerf modding. I know, crazy concept, and I went ahead and I replaced their pusher motor. It's a single gear on the end of it to a Valkyrie, which should run on 3S and give me a slightly higher rate of fire. Nothing else has been changed except I removed the thermistor up here and shorted this in the back. So other than that, I've kept the stock board. I think that that's gonna keep us from burning out. I put a little piece of E-tape here to prevent some shorts, but our circuit should be good to go. Now, you guys are gonna get your first sort of sneak preview of my paint job here. I think it's pretty sharp, reminds me of my favorite Transformer. And I even went ahead and painted some of the details. The Dart Zone Pro logo is the only logo I didn't remove from the blaster while I was sanding and prepping and painting, because honestly, I didn't wanna impact these lines on this logo here, or on this inset piece, and outside of like printing an entirely different version of this piece, I thought that this would be the cleanest, easiest way. I did, however, paint it and make it this kind of metallic black. Now this is one of our first upgrades. This is the side panel from the Mk3. It's got an inset here and 3 screws that hold it in place. You can use those same screws to replace it with our side panel, which adds pick rail to the side for use with like a laser or a light or anything that you might want to do with your Mk3. We construct our 2-part pick rail add-on by using Mk3 hardware to take these kind of heat set nuts and the hardware themselves and attach in 2 different places the pick rail onto the top, and the pick rail itself is contoured to the lines of the blaster. That'll be more obvious later on. For right now, we just need to install that panel on the back so that it has something to attach to. Next up, we're going to put our electronics back in. Probably start with reconnecting the pusher to the spring and go from there. Remember the old loop-de-loop here? These wires even kind of remember how they used to go. Just a quick note, if you're going to use our part, 132s are about as far as you can take the cans. Given that nobody else is even going to use 132s and most people use 130 size motors for everything, that should be fine. Just if you plan on using our pick rail kit, I would not recommend going out and shelling out for like, you know, Blade 180s. I don't think that it's necessary and it won't fit, so. Now we're going to start putting some of the internal components back in, but one thing that we thought could be better is that the rev switch specifically, given that Bobo works here at Eighth or Not now, we knew that we were going to need some sort of Bobo style rev trigger, although we pulled it up instead of down because ergonomically that feels much better. You know, we printed it in Vertigo Gray because why not? Step 1 is take your large spring, set it right there on that post. You're going to take this guy, carefully attach this spring, and then get it back down. Then you use this bit right here to hold the entire mechanism in place. This is what connects your full auto circuit to your switch and then disconnects it so that you can use a mechanical semi-auto trigger. Next, you're going to want to pop this back off and connect these two so your full auto will work. Next, take your linkage, put that back where it goes. Lock it into place. Another fun upgrade is that this sometimes forces you to drop your adapter. In a world where halflinks are what we want to be shooting predominantly anyway, we went ahead and we made a lower profile version. If you take a look at the one on top of the other, you should be able to see that this is going to fit flush ish with the body of the blaster itself. Same spring, same hardware, but a slightly more aesthetic and effective solution. Quickly pop in our panel. As long as we're on the side of the shell, I do want to mention that while the regular short throw is fine, I thought that it would be nicer if we had something that was a little bit taller and a little bit longer for people who might have smaller hands. So we're replacing this version of the selector switch with our own version of the selector switch. Goes on the same way the other one came off. And of course, last but not least, the thing that the blaster needed most was a nose job. This is, I think, for foreign object intrusions, but given the comfort of the stock grip and the unnecessary amount of pick-tenny rail here, we decided to remove it entirely, make something that looked really sharp, really aggressive, had a nice open muzzle, and we even might have snuck in a few Easter eggs, but you have to pick up one of your very own to discover that. Given that we don't have control over what color other people paint their blasters, these ship in our proprietary pumpkin orange, but I wanted to do mine in vertigo gray because we designed the thing ourselves and I wanted one special just for me. So here we go. Tuck your XT60 connector back in and you're good to go. All right, so we've got the blaster cinched up. We went ahead and put our rubber grip back on. The other thing with a rubber grip is, of course, this stock. Now, while there's nothing wrong with this stock, and I think that it's just fine, we sell a much nicer one over on Foam Pro Shop, and I thought that for the purposes of making a Bumblebee Mark III, we had to go in there and add our stock to it because I just think that it's a little more tactical and a little bit sharper. The only other things worth mentioning are, of course, the magazine system and the battery tray. So while we did go ahead and we designed this really nice kind of extended battery tray, which gives you an extra 7mm of play so that you could fit more generic batteries in, half the fun of over on the shop, and this is the best option if you already have a 3S LiPo that you really want to use with this blaster. But if this blaster is what's getting you into LiPos, then you absolutely, and again, I want to point out, this is like a usual 3S LiPo, and with this, here, and the extended battery tray here, this guy can fit if I tuck it under my paint job like so. But while we think that this is an elegant solution that mirrors a lot of the originals, when we already went to the trouble of sourcing a battery that fits the tray as absolutely perfectly as the one that we sell on Foam Pro Shop does, the whole advantage there is that you can use the stock battery tray or the stock battery door, which allows you to get this really cool paint job that mirrors the lines of the shell exactly, because you can remove this panel and match it to that panel. So we're going to be using that in this instance here. Now, just to show you guys one last time how this tucks in, seems like it was almost tailor-made. Given that that goes there, the cables kind of fold underneath. This goes here, even with this, this relatively thick enamel paint job. That goes there. Screws into place very, very nicely. I like the way that the stock battery door looks on this one, so I wanted to find a LiPo that could really perfect that. Again, if you already have a LiPo that you're super happy with, I think that our solution of a matched battery system is going to suit you just fine. Now, of course, there were a lot of other reviewers who were having issues with the stock magazine adapter. They were having issues with Talons in particular. And I'm not ashamed to say that we wanted to go ahead and solve two problems, both of which in this system, 4 screws come off, and then we have this. So this is an extended throw and it mirrors the other one. So this is our low profile mag release that actually makes it significantly trickier to misstep. This is going to make it so that you always get the actual adapter as opposed to the release. And when you want to remove your adapter, you come down like this and then you click this and then it comes out. So this is, you can use it for full length mags if you want something incredibly low profile, but this was designed to kind of aesthetically fit our throwback, I guess, mag release and put the controls closer for people who might not have as long fingers. Now, an issue that people were discussing with Talons was the darts getting pulled back into the system. This is something that we didn't truly experience until we started looking for it, and now that we've drastically improved the rate of fire of the blaster, it is something that we found to be true. Now, I'm just gonna go ahead and shout him out. We shamelessly took this solution from my buddy Luke over at Out of Darts. He sells these we're gonna sell them in our bits kit, but realistically, we're gonna be giving them away in any order that has anything to do with the Mark III, because this is a 2-minute print, and in all honesty, it's something that I think should have been solved on the front end. Now, as a full caveat, like, is Dart Zone necessarily responsible for giving us perfect compatibility with things that they don't sell? I have no idea. So far, they've been really, really good about it, and I like that the solution, at least in this instance, was just that simple. So this is a tiny little ramp that effectively closes off the back of the adapter for when you're using half lengths, and allows you to just use it more efficiently with Talon magazines. You can still use their magazine with it. It doesn't affect that at all, but you can also use Talons now. And all this does is it prevents a dart from getting pulled back through while allowing this specific pusher to interface over it very comfortably. A really brilliant little fix from Luke to, again, a problem that we were just not encountering at the rate that he was. And in all honesty, like, there's no better way to do this I can think of. I could have danced around it or tried to come up with something novel, but good artists copy, great artists do what Luke does. So that is our new adapter system. And with that said, I think it's time to take it outside and put it over the chronograph and show you what the entire project with all of our parts and our battery looks like coming together all at once. It's gonna be so good. All right, guys, so we're out here with the full-on Bumblebee Mark III. We haven't tested any of these things yet. We're using our Magilla cage setup with Twilight wheels. I want to try these darts first, simply because these are the darts that gave us the best results when we were using their cage and the same 3S LiPo. I think it's going to be really tough for the Magilla cage to beat the 182, but perhaps it'll be a little bit more consistent. That would be, you know, pretty nice if we could dial it in just a little bit more. Other than that, just the overall comfort and stylings of the blaster looks pretty sweet with a paint job, if I do say so myself. But let's get a couple of numbers. And that is what I'm talking about. Consistent 170s, yes. We didn't break the 182 though, so like, good for Dart Zone, they made a heck of a cage. We're gonna go ahead and throw in our adapter now. I wanna play with some half-length stuff. I've got two of the, we've rotated these largely out of the SE&C, but these are two pretty garbo Worker Gen 2 magazines. These are Adventure Force Pro darts. These are the ones that you can get at Walmart. They're like not super duper expensive and they're relatively consistent. We're gonna pop a couple of those off in semi-auto, and then we're gonna do the thing that I'm really excited about, which is try some full auto shots. And it seems like with the AF Pros, we're, you know, not even actually a great end war blaster. The FPS has dropped. Now the half lengths had lower performance and the AF Pros were not necessarily great in that arena to begin with, but mid 130s, 120s, all the way up and down, you would have to come in consistently under 130 for an end war blaster. But the thing that I'm most excited about is to hop into the selector switch here, which again, being a little longer and a little taller, is now very easy to reach with one hand. And I'm going to go over, I might even bring this in a little bit because I actually, the accuracy of the Twilight Wheel Magilla cage setup is pretty dialed in, pretty consistent. But what I want to do is I want to be able to see pretty clearly on camera what the new rate of fire looks like. So I also want to make sure that this is a, you know, again, a full Talon. We've got Luke's fix, or I guess our flavor of it, in the magwell adapter, and I just want to make sure that we can get through the whole thing in full auto. That's not full auto, this is full auto. All right, I switched. Did I just break it? All right, guys, so the goal of this channel has always been to make the coolest stuff possible, and sometimes when you're the first person pioneering that cool stuff, it doesn't go the way that you want it to. That's fine. I was going to buy a Mark III anyway. I'm definitely not gonna warranty my sample. I'm just gonna take this one on the chin. I wanted to try something crazy. I paid the price for it. Now you guys don't have to. Don't put a Valkyrie on your pusher. You can install it. It'll work great in testing. I had like 2 or 3 beautiful magazines with like 5, 6 dart per second, like brrr, performance. And then lo and behold, and I'm glad we caught it on camera, I take it out to do the final demo, and I almost am happier that it broke for me than I would have been if it broke a week from now after I'd already launched this video. So effectively, I'm super happy with all the parts that we make. I'm actually not super stoked that the linkage system, this Bart Simpson gear that attaches to this lever arm here, and if I put them back together, you can see exactly where they broke. So there's that, and it broke right here. It broke right here, incidentally, because that is the pin where it connects to the return spring, the thing that allows the, in full auto, the pusher mechanism to reciprocate is the connection point there, and it uses the same spring that it uses for the semi-auto when it's using it as a lever to throw the pusher forward. Like the connection is beautiful, and honestly, it's very smart. I think that the ability to do a mechanical linkage for semi-auto and then an electronic linkage for full auto is actually very, very smart. I like it a lot. Unfortunately, it was not designed to do a much higher rate of fire, and I guess the repeated stress of cha-chunk, 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 cha-chunk 6 times a second was too much for admittedly what is a very thin, very frail injection molded ABS, I guess, lever piece. I don't hold that against anybody. I don't think that, they were, the motors inside are quite robust. The pusher motor is a little anemic by comparison. I think that that's clearly a stress system thing. If they made that better, then they'd have to make X, Y, Z better as well. So I'm not gonna go down the speculation rabbit hole. What I will tell you is that I am very excited, given that this video will be launching after October 1st. I've got a couple of Mark IIIs on pre-order. Or on order with Target.com. I'm probably gonna order another one now, and we'll get Bumblebee back up and running with a different pusher motor. I'm sure that my sister and her lovely wife over at Foam Blast are already working on a motor specifically catered to the pusher mechanism for their Mark III, and when they come up with something clever, I'm excited to see what it is. I just wanted Max DACA on 3S, and I can now tell you that is not an excellent idea. So the blaster itself, quite sweet. The kit that we made, very proud of. Luke's fix for Talon magazines actually worked at 6 starts a second. The linkage system between semi and full auto, not cut out for that. So a kind of like sad end to what I think is a very cool video, a really neat mod guide, but a very interesting way for me to provide even more value to you guys looking to modify your own Mark III. So that's just my take on it. I think that the Mark III is a really cool platform. I'm excited to do more stuff with it. All of the parts that you saw are available on foamproshop.com. They're down in the description box down below. In fact, I put back together a dead blaster because I wanted to show them off. I couldn't do the outro without it. The pick rails are absolutely sharp. I love the way that they hug the contour of the blaster itself. And by, mating to the body, we get to maintain that line in paint jobs on both sides so that you get consistent design language here and here still. I like that a lot. I'm super stoked with how our battery works. I absolutely love our muzzle. I think that the muzzle is so aggressively cool. And the magazine changes, linkages, the improvement to the rev trigger where your finger no longer gets pinched, everything about it, including the ability to now hit your selector switch no matter how big your hands are, is a really, really cool suite of upgrades. So I highly recommend, and it would mean the absolute world to me if you would support the channel by picking up some of those parts down in the description box below. Thank you guys so much for watching. That's been my Mark III mod guide. I guarantee you other people are gonna do it differently. Some of them will undoubtedly do it better. But I wanted to get mine out there so that you guys knew what the options were and how the internals worked, and you could tinker with it your own self. Thank you so much for watching. Much love. Blast on Drac out.